How's it going, boys and girls? Alright, so we've got our new NVLink bridge that's arrived from EVGA, and I got my old one here. I just thought we'd do like a quick comparison of those. And I got my previously existing PCI Express riser card, and then the new one of those that came in the mail. It's just another of the exact same model. And as we discussed in the previous video, we're going to be taking these two 3090s out of here and installing them using the riser cables. But we'll have the card sitting somehow outside of the case. I'm going to take this radiator out and probably prop it up somewhere on the top just so it'll be above the card and not lower than the card, because as people have been mentioning in the last video, this isn't really good to have the water go down like this, because air bubbles can get trapped and cause degradation of your pump. I really haven't been using this card anyway, so I don't think it's really been hurting anything, but just in case, like I say, now that we will be using it, I'm going to try to get it out and put it on top of the case somehow, or just set it up somewhere. I'm pretty much just going to have to use, like, I've got foam and then other like foam inserts that came with various things, and I'll try to set it up maybe so like the cards can rest somehow in here, or they might rest okay kind of in the center of this or something, but whatever. I've got it pushed up against the wall pretty good, and I've got enough space on my table here that I should be able to try to set them up somehow external to the case. But as I mentioned before, the reason for doing this is they only make 4-slot bridges. This is my old 4-slot bridge that I had from the 20 series cards, but they only make 4-slot bridges, and this motherboard requires 3 slots. So if we want to get the cards spaced properly apart from one another, we're going to have to use riser cables and set them up outside of the case so that we can kind of set them at whatever distance apart from one another that we want, and customize our distance so that we can use a 4-slot bridge. But give me a second, I'll open up this, we can look at these different bridges and compare them, and then I'm going to go ahead and start getting things hooked up, and then we're going to play around with RTX 3090s and SLI using my Threadripper 3960X as our processor. Just as like a forewarning, people are going to probably look at the scores that I'm going to get and think that they're kind of low, and that'll probably be true because the Threadripper really doesn't have super high per core performance on the CPU. You know, it's like, it's got a lot of cores, and you can actually use AMD Ryzen Master and shut half of the cores off and get better per core performance, but it's still not going to match up to something like a 5950X or like the Intel equivalent of like a 10900K or the new 11th gen chips whenever they come out. This is going to have slower cores because the CPU is slower. And I really can't overclock it that much, because even with the 1500 watt supply, as we previously mentioned in the last video, each of these GPUs is going to use between 450 and 500 watts. That's already 1000 watts. CPU uses 280. That doesn't leave us that much left to run the rest of the system and then have any kind of overclocking headroom. So I couldn't find a bigger power supply than this. Things are hard to get right now, and I couldn't even have ran it on my previous 1200 watt supply. So just keep those things in mind. Temper your expectations a little bit, and SLI is not well supported anyway. For the most part, the only thing we're going to be able to test is synthetic benchmarks like 3D Mark Firestrike. I can see if Superposition will use SLI, and I know there are some games that will use it like Witcher 3, and we can test that. But as far as most games don't use SLI, I can play around and try to get some things to work. If anybody has any requests about games they want to see run on this that I don't cover in this video, hit me up, let me know, and I'll see if it's a game I already have, I will test it. If it's a game I can get for cheap, I will also be willing to test it. Toothless is here to let us know that he approves of this video content. But give me a second here, we'll get up these bridges. If you haven't already done so, please click the like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below. Thanks. Alright, so we've got the two different NVLink bridges out, and this is, like I said, the previous predecessor generation that worked with the RTX 20 series cards, a la touring cards, and you can see a larger connector and then a smaller portion of the connector. And then the newer ones, which they have of course made a different version, has two that are about the same size. It looks like the left is just slightly bigger connector, maybe like one more pin than the one on the right, but whatever. So this is the new one, and like I say, in their infinite wisdom, they're only doing 4 slots instead of 3, so we can't do I can't just throw a freaking bridge in there and be done with it. I got to play around and try to figure out how to set this up outside of the case. So anyways, just wanted to recap, show you guys the different older bridge and the newer bridge, which is why we had to get a different one. Otherwise I could have just used this. And I'm going to go ahead here and take out the two cards, see about setting them up somehow outside of the case in such a fashion that they'll work without tipping over or anything like that, and get them connected with our bridge and see if they work. So let's do that. Alright, well, it looks pretty ghetto, and it's sitting outside here, and the cables aren't quite as long as I thought they were, so like it barely gets outside. It'd probably be better to get some slightly longer cables. I think these are like 30 centimeters or something like that, so maybe try to find something a bit longer than that if you have to do this. But it wasn't working. I couldn't get a signal, and what I figured out is that these riser cables, and I don't even know if they make a Gen 4 riser cable, and that may be the problem, but I had to take everything back apart and put just one card in, go into the BIOS, tell it to run all of the PCI Express slots at Gen 3, then hooked everything back up, and now it works. With Gen 4, I suspect somehow there's an incompatibility between Gen 4 and the riser cables because I was getting no signal, but as soon as I switched them to Gen 3, they worked fine. I got stuff wedged in there just to kind of keep them at a good distance, try to keep them as stable as possible. It's sort of physically difficult to do that. They want to lean, and I don't want to damage the bridge. I don't want to damage the connectors, so that's a little bit of a, like I say, a physically precarious thing that we've got going on here. I don't know how long I'll keep it like this. I don't even know if it's worth the risk. Maybe what I'll do someday is build, or try to get like a 5950X or something with a 4-slot layout, and then just do a proper SLI gaming rig. I don't know. We'll see what I'll feel like doing. I haven't been able to find a 5950X in stock, but someday maybe I'll be able to find one, and then we can do this without, like I say, having the cards done externally. They could just be connected to the board correctly and good to go. I got my radiators just kind of sitting on top there. It works, so whatever. And as you can see, we do have our enabled GPUs. For some reason, I really am irritated with EVGA's software, but their Precision X1 keeps forgetting the settings. So like basically what I've been having to do, I have to leave it open and just minimized. If I close it, the fan settings go back to default every time. It never retains them. I do have the correct settings, it just doesn't work. So I suspect that it just needs to be updated again or something like that. But at least it's working. So I guess the next thing to do is to try and run some kind of a benchmark and see if it works. But like I said, you have to set it to PCI Express 3.0. We will lose a slight bit of performance for that, but on the plus side, I get to run them at 16 lanes apiece because my processor has 88 PCI Express lanes, whereas your standard desktop CPU would only have 16 and maybe some additional lanes from the chipset, so you might get 24 on a regular board, whereas with this they'll both continue to run at 16x lanes because I have so many in the processor. So we'll make up in performance there probably what we'll lose for running it at Gen 3. So with that said, I guess next up will be attempt some benchmarks.
2 days later.
So a couple of days have actually passed since I started doing this because I'm having some power issues with it where it's like it's not fully shutting off, but it's really close. It's like it'll just hard shut down, but the motherboard lights and the RAM lights will keep going. And as you can see now, I'm using 2 cases to run this because I separated the GPUs and their radiators out from the main case because, as you saw previously in the video, I couldn't get everything to fit in that other case. And the first riser cables that I used were too short. I already had one. I bought another of the same kind, thinking that they would allow them to sit outside the case, as you saw previously in the video, but there really wasn't that much space, and it was kind of tenuous sitting on those foam blocks that I was using. I just didn't really care for it, and so I ordered some longer cables instead, and these are supposedly capable of supporting Gen 4. I haven't tried enabling that yet because some people on there seem to have mixed results, but most people had positive results with these cables. They're a bit on the pricey side, but they're 50% longer than the previous cables that I had. And so I figured, why not reach them through the back of this cable. As you can see, I'm using these as spacers because there's not a lot to stabilize the cards in here. I've got 2 screws on the end of each. I've got a box down here with foam in it to keep this at a good level, and then I put 2 in, these as spacers, and then the bridge will add some stability. But they're fairly weighty cards, and not as heavy as they were with their air cooling, but they're still fairly heavy, and so I wanted to get as much stability as possible because they're not plugged into a motherboard. It's just that I've got this right angle riser cable here, and then there's the other one back in there that you can't see, but they're just kind of hanging in there. The cards are connected to them, and then I, connected them to the back of the case with a couple of screws on each, etc. And so they seem to be fairly stable. And then I got one radiator up front, one radiator on the top. I had to move the power supply in my other case because luckily this case allows you for 2 power supply spaces. So I moved it to the front so the power cables for the GPUs could reach, because they weren't reaching when it was in the back. It was a couple inches too short. So it's powered up. I'm about to give it a test run and see if it still has any power issues. I have had some successful benchmarks that I've run, as I'll show you guys here in a little bit, but because it's just been unstable. Like I say, it worked fine for a while, and then it would crash, and it would work fine for a while, and it would crash, and then especially when I tried to do deep fix, which on the bonus side, if I can get this to work stably, SLI works for deep fix. With 2 individual 3090s, before I bought the bridge, I tried using, like I said, both GPUs to process and train one of my deepfake models, and it would always error out. But when I enabled SLI, that went away, and it's definitely faster. It's definitely using both cards. It cut the training time in about in half, as you would hope for. So it works. I just trying to see if I can get this to be more stable. If I can't get this stable, and SLI is pretty much dead, and it is pretty much dead outside of the deepfakes, which is the reason I want it to work anyway. But for gaming, there's very few games where it works. I'll go into that a little bit later, but there's a few benchmarks where it works and a few games where it works, but otherwise it's pretty much just to speed up the training of my deepfakes. If I can't really get this to be stable, what I'm thinking I might do, and maybe you guys can leave some comments in the, leave a comment below and let me know your thoughts, maybe vote on it. Maybe I'll take one of these, try to sell it off / trade it, see if someone will trade me like a Radeon 6900 XT and give me some cash for one of my hybrids. I'll keep the other one, keep it in this system for doing deepfakes, but then we can test some gaming on the 6900 XT. I haven't seen too many people with those. It's mostly 6800 XTs that I see on YouTube. I'm sure someone's out there doing it, but I haven't seen that many of them. I think they were pretty hard to get. I don't see any for sale around town, but someone might want to do that if they saw one of these cards go for trade. So leave your comments and your thoughts on that below. But I'm gonna go back here to trying to benchmark this some more, test some more things, and see if it's stable or not. So let's check that out. Alright guys, so I'm just going to record this with my phone, but anyways, so you can see here, like in the first benchmark, Port Royal, so SLI does work on some tests, but like they have to be either DirectX 12 or Vulkan API. NVIDIA's dropped support for anything below those APIs entirely, so I wasn't able to get SLI to work in like Witcher 3, for example. I tried for quite a while, screwed around with it, but they've even taken out of the NVIDIA control panel the AFR and AFR2 options, so you can't force alternate frame rendering modes or anything like that. Either the game is natively coded to support it, or it doesn't work at all anymore. And so even some benchmarks I can't test because they don't work. So like anything using DirectX 11, like regular Firestrike, doesn't work. Even what was weird is like I couldn't get regular TimeSpy to work, but TimeSpy Extreme worked, even though they're both DirectX 12. So it's like it either works or it doesn't work. There's not much I can do to make it do anything, unfortunately. But Port Royal, so like the first time I ran it, I had my card set to Gen 3, and ended up getting like number 63rd on the top 100, and then just by enabling Gen 4, which as you saw previously, I have those longer Gen 4 compliant riser cables now. I jumped up to number 59 in the list with no effort whatsoever, so that was nice. But so Port Royal worked. We've got TimeSpy Extreme scores that worked out well. Like I said, what's funny is like it's getting almost exactly the same frame rate in the Extreme version that it does in the non-Extreme version, because it uses 1 or 2 GPUs respectively. So that worked. I was able to get DirectX ray tracing feature test to use it. The DLSS feature test used it, and like I said, I did pretty well in those benchmarks. I did try Shadow of the Tomb Raider benchmark, and I tried playing the other game I actually got to work in was Deus Ex Machina. What is it? It's the second one, Human Revolution or whatever. Mankind Divided, sorry. And that actually has native support for DirectX 12 and multi-GPU support. And so I could play that game in 5K, and I was getting like 90 frames a second in 5K with everything turned on, everything. And that's a really good looking game, even though it's a bit older now, a few years old, but it still looks phenomenal. And like I say, in 5K with all those settings cranked up. For some reason, so like I have a demo of the game here that'll be playing here in a second, and it's like you can't use any overlays or it won't even load the game. Like with SLI enabled, any DirectX 12 game I tried to load would not work. It would just crap out and give me like some kind of a driver crashed error. So any kind of overlay I tried to use, Precision X1 has their overlay to show you specs or show you like GPU usage and so forth, and frame rates. That didn't even work. It didn't crash the game. It just doesn't work. Their overlay has never worked in almost anything, so it didn't work. And then I have like the FPS, I forget the name of it, but what if there's like an overlay I normally use that has like my logo in it and so forth, and that one, if I tried to use that, any DirectX 12 game wouldn't even load it at all, so I couldn't get it to work. I also tried Red Dead Redemption 2, which is one of the games that was listed as supporting multiple GPUs that should have worked with SLI in this. The game won't work. It's a black screen. It gets to the main menu, but if you try to load the benchmark or the actual game, you just get a black screen and it doesn't work. I've tried a bunch of different stuff. I reinstalled the game, moved it to a different drive. It's impossible to get it to work. It's just black screens. So they've basically killed SLI support in 99% of the things that you'd want to screw with it. The only reason I still want to try to get it to work consistently is that it does work for training deepfakes, which for me is kind of why I got it anyway. So it's nice that it works for that. The downside is I'm still having power consistency issues. So it'll work, and then it'll just randomly, it'll seem like it must hit a point where it's either spiking the power really high or something, because that's what a lot of people were suggesting, is that I'm not, I got that 1500 watt supply from Thermaltake. It's a titanium certified supply. Seems like it's a nice one. It got good reviews. Everybody who reviewed it said positive things about it. But the people that I was speaking to, there's a Facebook forum that I use for tech support, and it's like the people there seem to think that I really don't have quite enough wattage, or they claim that supply is a piece of junk, and people want to say shit like about the brands they don't like. So whatever. I don't think it's a junk power supply. I just don't think it may not be sufficient for this workload, because you figure each of these cards can use up to 500 watts. I've had them using like 488 or something with an overclock, but at stock they never used that much, and I didn't try to overclock them, so I don't, whatever. And then the CPU's TDP is 280 watts, but altogether I did like some math on the amount of wattage that my system should be using, and it's like the 23090s together could possibly use 1000 watts total. The processor is a 280 watt TDP, but maybe it's jumping past that as well. If it's auto ramping up and boosting past that stock frequency, then I don't know how many watts it's using, and it could be jumping up well beyond the 280 watts that it's supposed to use. If it's doing that, then yeah, my power supply is insufficient. But the amount of RAM that I have 128 gigs of RAM, and based on what I found on Google, it's supposedly like 3 watts per 8 gigs, and so I have 48 watts being used for RAM. I have a pair of solid state drives, so that's like 5 watts. I have 3 NVMe SSDs in there. That's like another 12 watts. And then I have 5 case fans, so that's like 8 watts. So total, it was like 1,353 watts that it should be theoretically able to use. And that's if like you overclock the piss out of the GPUs, which I'm not doing. But like I say, if the CPU is really jumping well past 280 watts, then it's encompassing the remainder of whatever I have left, and it's too much. I've tried looking around for other supplies, because I could still return this Thermaltake one and just, say it didn't work for me, which is all it really takes to get your money back from Amazon. I could send it back, but I don't have, there's nothing I could replace it with. They don't have anything. There are no 2,000 watt power supplies available. There's nothing, like, the only thing slightly better would be a 1,600 watt supply, and I'm not going to do all that work and swap it back out for a difference of 100 watts that may not help the problem anyway. I'd like to get a 2,000 watt supply and see if that would do it, but again, it's like you can't get them. The mining community has bought up everything, and there's nothing. EVGA's site has nothing. Amazon had nothing. They have like one from FSP, which is an okay company, but it's not available through Prime, so you'd have to wait like a month to get it. And then nothing else was available on Newegg. like EVGA's website has nothing for sale of any kind. They have no GPUs, no CPUs, or well, not CPUs, but they have no power supplies. They might have some stuff on there, but they didn't have anything that I needed. So you get the idea. I can't really do anything to test beyond that. So what I'm going to do, I've ordered this little adapter that will. Sorry, I'm just trying to hold the phone. My arm's getting annoyed. I ordered a little adapter so I can daisy chain 2 power supplies. So what I'm going to do is take and use the 1500 watt from Thermaltake to run the GPUs, and then I'm going to take my 1200 watt EVGA Supernova that I was using previously and have it run like my motherboard, RAM, CPU, things like that. So for a total of 2700 watts, but like I say, split up between the two. As you saw a minute ago, like I basically got it in 2 different cases. So it's almost like having two systems for one system. But we should be able to hopefully spread out the love a little bit that way with the power. And if it still doesn't work after that, then I'm assuming it may be the NVLink bridge, because I've tested 2 sets of riser cables and had the same result. If it's not power, which we will, like I say, be able to verify tomorrow, then that's not the problem. And the only other new thing that I've introduced into the system at that point is the NVLink bridge. So either the bridge would be bad, or maybe there's something wrong with the motherboard and it's having a problem running SLI correctly. Maybe there's like a chipset driver that needed to be updated, but I've got the latest BIOS and all that stuff. So to just kind of cap this video off, SLI is totally not worth the headache. It doesn't work in anything except for like a very select number of games, and doesn't even work in that many benchmarks. It doesn't work in the games that I wanted it to work in. Like I say, Witcher 3 is the game that I'd previously used SLI in with great success, but since they've completely taken out support from their drivers for a lot of this stuff, I even tried rolling back like 3 or 4 iterations of drivers, but if you go beyond that, they don't support Ampere cards. So it's like whenever they added Ampere support, they dropped SLI support. So you really can't do anything so good. So it's unfortunate, but like I say, glad I could test it so you don't have to. If anybody has any questions, please ask them in the comment section below. If there are any applications or games you'd like me to test, as I said before, I'm willing to do that as long as I keep this set up. But vote, like I said, in the comment section if you think I should ditch one of these cards if this isn't going to work. And then, like I say, after tomorrow, if I install that adapter and daisy chain the supplies and it still doesn't work, then it's kind of like SLI isn't going to work for me for any reason, which is too bad because it does speed up the training process on deepfakes exponent, pretty much like you'd expect. It's about twice as fast. So I'd like it to work, but if it doesn't work and you guys want me to take and, like I say, maybe trade one of those cards off and try to get like a 6900 XT, and then we could do some gaming benchmarks and so forth with that, you vote in the comment section. You let me know what you think, and maybe I'll take action based on that. But appreciate you guys watching. If you have any questions, please leave them below. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. We're getting really close to 1,000 subscribers. Wanted to do that by the end of last year, but we're getting really close here, so it's cool. Thanks for watching. Let's talk to you guys again real soon. Later.